I'm back. Well, here we are today, taking a look around the evil owl. He's up there with his pentagram, if you look hard enough. And yeah, we're going to take a look around the studio, the finished result. Something that took 3 to 4 months to actually get where it's at today, and it's still not entirely finished, believe that or not. But I always said that by the time we get this finished, I'd take everyone around the studio to have a look at how it's ended up so far. I mean, like I say, there are some things to still even make work, and some of those things you're going to see today, and then you're going to say, oh, he's going to do this or he's going to do that. Or you might not say anything, that's okay. So what I want to do is to start walking around the studio from that corner over there, which is pretty boring down that wall, but that's okay, and we'll work our way around this room, and then we'll move into the control room, and then we'll talk about a few things in there as well as we go. In fact, we'll talk about most things that have had any trouble. And then we'll move into the original room, which is that away, the other side of the camera. I've still got a few things lying around on the floor, as you do, but it's taken a long time, something to consider. If you're doing either a home studio or a studio like this one, that's a little bit one up on a home studio, I would say. What you do want to do is to make sure that you put stuff, well, tidy, where you can find things, because I'm telling you now, if you don't, you will find nothing. The place is, well, in my case, this is big enough to not be able to find things. Not so much amps and things like that, but specialised cables and, you know, the sort of thing. The stuff that you want when you can never find. Now today, I don't know how long this video is going to be. It's going to be as long as it takes. I will be talking about one or two sort of technical sort of things as we go. And nothing that anybody couldn't handle, of course, but it is interesting stuff. If you're interested in setting up, for example, an AVB network, well, here's a good example. It's working, and it works very well. But it does cost you a bit of money. Well, you save on the cable, you don't save so much, maybe on some of the other stuff. Well, here we are at the sort of start of this new extension. And I've still got one or two things here that I had in the old studio. This plastic rack that's full of all sorts of cables and all sorts of things. I never did actually sort them all out, but I did sort of make them in a bit more order than what they were. So that stays there for now. It will eventually be updated, and I'll probably sell off the cables on eBay or something. There's just too many of them. As you'll see as we go around, I've got a toolbox on the top here, and that's always, well, to be honest, it's pretty essential, but it does have some funny things in it that shouldn't be there. Oh my God, Legendary Tones Hot Mod. And that's a great thing if you want to check the reviews I've done on that one. Anyway, I'll leave it there for now. It's only simply because everything's not totally tidied yet. It is a massive job to do. Anyway, moving along a bit. I've had this for a while as well. This sort of wheels around in the studio if you want it to. It's got its place, but its place at the moment's right there. And I've got a desktop mic stand hiding under there. I've also got a 120 volt mains transformer there for when I buy something that's, well, it's not English, but it's the wrong voltage. And those are really useful. I used to use it a lot on amps that I've since converted, so not necessary. Looking at that thing there, yeah, this door here was a right pain in the neck, and I think I've spoken about that historically in earlier videos of this series. By the way, this is the last video in the series. So that door there, you can see, well, it opens, but there's this great big fat thing, yeah. And I'm not referring to somebody I know. It's terrible. But it is what it is. That's what they did, or I was going to wait 3 or 4 weeks for a door that they should have ordered months earlier. That's another story. Entrance door, I don't use it, but it is a very strong entrance door. That isn't one anybody's going to kick in anytime soon. And I think one of the things you need to consider in any studio, particularly if it's outside, is the security. Security in this place, following the last couple of days, and you'll get to see that, As you can see down there, we've got a little section of this room that's got a bass guitar sitting in it. It's one Alan's left here, Alan Bruce, bass guy, singer, plays guitar too. Well, he says he does. Hi Al. Yeah, so we've got that, and we've got another bass over there. This one's a Wesley, and that's an Araya Pro 2. Oh my God, you'll see it as I pass. At the moment, we've got a dehumidifier also in here. So let's move around a bit to where that window is over there. Now actually, I haven't dressed this room up for you. This is as it actually is. And you can see these things sitting on the window here, these little blocks of, well, they look like cardboard things. And those are there, along with these others over here. Because this isn't just a studio. It's used for recording videos like this, but it's also used for recording audio as well. It depends what you're trying to do. I wouldn't call it just a regular run-of-the-mill recording studio, unless you find regular run-of-the-mill recording studios with media desks and that sort of thing. Let's move on to the window. You can see we've got the bars in here. And the bars are an essential aspect of any premises that you have. You'll see more as we go further down into the other rooms. Every window is barred and every door is high security. So there are no low security anythings in this building, and there could never be. Bear that in mind, won't you? Also notice, while we're in this section, you'll see another one of these things. You see this? It's reflecting light off the wall. It's not coming towards me, but it does actually do a pretty good job. And when you're doing the filming, you can get everything just as you want it. So them are really worth having. I think they were £70 for a pair with the stands. Now, one last thing on this window, you can imagine in the daytime that if you look at my face now, you can probably see that this side's white or light and that side's darker. If you have a look at the thing on the screen now, that's just like a piece of plastic that we stick up against this. I'll be getting blinds in there, but that's one of the aspects I just wanted to cover regarding windows if you're going into making a media studio. This is the media desk, and it's not any old thing. It's something that can handle different widths and things like that. It has to be sort of strong enough so that you can actually put stuff on top that's got a bit of weight. That's one of the things I've got. And down underneath here, you can see there's a sort of mains thing, and there's this thing across here for when you see the videos, scrolling past gear and that sort of thing. Loads of stuff down here, but I'm not going to go to great depths of that stuff because, look, they're irrelevant if you haven't got a media studio. In a media studio, which this section is, we'll be moving to the recording section presently. But there's recording in here too. You need a nice backdrop. I've got the Evil Owl logo, which is nice. There he is, pentagram included. But I also wanted to have some gear in the back here. I've got two separate amps, and you notice that they're lit up a little bit. You might not see too much in the daylight, but when you get filming properly, it's all good. But I can still use these amps. There's nothing stopping me coming and plugging into these, putting a mic there, and away you go. Yeah, it all makes sense to me. This is a little section of the media studio where I just keep various bits of gear, some of which will be reviewed and some of which won't. I've got some other stuff, but I can't show it on camera, so tough. Now, scarily, as well as the PC you can see there, we've got one of these things. It's yeah, it's one of them Rode things. You've seen them, haven't you? Well, maybe you haven't. But basically, what it is, it's like a mixer that you can use for streaming and that sort of thing. And yeah, that's one of the things we're going to be doing, is having live streaming sessions when we get it fixed up. Obviously it takes time to do, so it hasn't happened yet, but it's sitting there waiting to be done. And yeah, I can't wait to get my hands on this one. It all looks pretty cool. So that's going to come up, well, just keep watching. You'll be notified when it comes. And that'll be really good, because what you'll be able to do is to talk on a one-to-one. You can even have a phone in. One of the things I like about this, you can put a phone on the input side. Somebody can call it. Then we can bring them into the conversation, which I think is really quite good. And I've got these number of pads down here that are really useful for blanking out when you swear, because sooner or later you will. Or you can run jingles or all sorts of things. It's all pretty cool, really. And of course, linked with that is the Rode mic. Yeah, I've got one of them. But I've got a load of other mics, and yeah, no doubt we'll be using them as we carry on. Notice just to the left of that on the wall, you can see a set of headphones. Well, that's where I keep the headphones for this section. And I've got more of them, but they're elsewhere at the moment. So you'll see headphones come and go. And of course, once you get 2 or 3 guys around this table I've just shown you, you're going to need some headphones and some microphones, aren't you? Yeah. Now, of course, it doesn't matter how you look at it. There's always going to be guitars around, and these are the ones that are just sitting in this media room. I've got a Tokai there, I've got an Epiphone, and of course I've got my trusty Ibanez RG550 Limited that I've had for years. Well, as you can see, right on the top above the Presonus Studio i24, there's an 8-way hub, and that's bringing all the stuff in from the 2 connectors that are just below. You can see them there. There's an orange and a blue. The orange one's for AVB, and the blue one comes into the top for the regular network. And if you look at just down a little bit, on the left hand side of those plugs, you'll see a sort of ducting that goes down towards the floor. And that's actually for getting the network, the regular network, not the AVB network, across to the desk, the media desk. So that's what that's for. Below the Studio i24, we've got a HPA6, I think that is, from LD Systems. That's a 6-unit headphone amplifier, as you can see. And that's wired in and working into the Studio i24. The item below that that's a Presonus proprietary switch that switches for AVB, but it's also got PoE on there, or Power over Ethernet, which can be useful for certain pieces of equipment, including some I'll be showing you a bit later on. But that's the rack, how it's set up. It's all pretty simple, really. Not a lot to show you on that one. It gets more complicated when we get back in the other room. And lastly, I'm just going to go up a little bit just to show you. If you look on the right hand top corner, you can just about see a little bit of the video camera that's designed to catch you when you break in. Yeah, and it's in full HD, and it's like my wife, it can see in the dark. Oh, there you are. Well, here we are around another little section. We're continuing around the studio. Yeah, and you can see the next chunk. This stuff here. Now you're going to find a lot of these racks around the studio, and it's something I wanted to talk about because it's one of them things that we never do. Nobody ever talks about this stuff, but I can tell you it's so important. These things come from IKEA, if you've ever heard of them, which you probably have. They're great for storing things down in the bottom, and you can see what I have various plastic racks or plastic boxes that I store down there, out the way. They've got lots of cables in, all the sort of things that normally jump the place up. You need them out the way, but you need to be able to find them quickly, like I said earlier. In any case, above that, you've got a good storage area for things like amps and stuff like that. You can see I've got some stuff that I recently reviewed. I've got a Bogner, yeah, Brixton, brilliant amp. I've got my Marshall, and I've got some Headrush stuff, things like that. The important thing is I can find this, and you never ever want to underestimate how important that is, to have proper storage in your studio. Never mind this thing about, you know, people will tell me, oh, it's not this, it's not that, it's not the other. Look, I've been recording in that part of the studio with very similar racks for about 28 years. People can tell me what they want. I know the recordings came out fine. I've sold millions. Well, I wish I had. I sold a few. And that's the important thing. The recordings work. Anyway, enough of that. Let's slither across a little bit. Again, in a studio, you never have this stuff at hand. It's never at hand. You can't find anything. So what we did is put some of these things around. This one's like the headphone one. And you'll see them around the studio, dotted around, with things that you can get at easy. In this case, the guitar cables. Oh, you're down there. Well, importantly, here's another one of them racks. I can see from the studio in here with this nice window we put in. And this is more storage. In this case I've got loads of pedals and stuff like that, but you can also see that I've got things like pens and a very old DR880, which is they're pretty brilliant them are, by the way, if anybody has never used one. So you've got your paperwork in here and all that sort of stuff, and I've got another section over there that we're going to zoom in and go a little bit closer to, because it's another one of them things that I want to show you. Oh my God, Tony, what's that? Well, it's one of them things that you'll never buy unless you're a keyboard player. But I'm not a keyboard player, so what the hell's it doing in here? Well, it's from Presonus. It's called an Atom SQ, and you know, occasionally you want to get some keyboard tones actually in your audio. I know it sounds bad, but the keyboard guys will tell you it doesn't sound bad. It only sounds bad when I do it, and there's the problem. It's all well and good having keyboards as long as you know what the black and the white bits do. Well, unfortunately, most guitarists, well, I say most, probably is most guitarists, don't have a clue about that sort of thing. Whereas me, well, I don't have a clue either. So one of the tricks to do with the Atom SQ is this, that unit can basically, see that keyboard across the bottom? It's a keyboard, just trust me it is. Well, you can set it up for a particular key, for example, and every note on it can't be wrong. It only provides you with the right notes. So even an idiot like me, yeah, me, can play keyboard note perfect with that thing. Now you're going to get a review of it at some stage, but not today. I just wanted to show it you. It's one of them things that's going to come up because it's so interesting to look at, and so interesting if you're not a keyboard player. Trust me, it's worth its weight in gold. I think they're a couple of £100 or something like that. Give or take, something like that. So that's sitting in the corner waiting to go. Well, actually there's not much else to look at down in this new extension. So you can see that a lot of it's to do with media, although it can be used for recording, as clearly that Presonus 24 rack allows. It's all good stuff. I've got another amp set up here, normally off camera, but again it's used to record. So let's move on to the control room, which is far more interesting than around a media studio. Note the bars, very important, like I said before. I'm now in the control room. This is the main control room, and it's got a lot of gear in here. There's a lot in other rooms as well, of course. You can see, once again, I've got this rack, and whether you're down the bottom here, or whether you're not, it's full of cables and pedals and all the sort of things that really, to be honest, there's nowhere else to put them. There is nowhere to put them. I could sell them all or get rid or whatever, but I don't think that's the case. Once again, you've got great storage for amplifiers. They sort of sit anywhere. These things come in handy as well, if ever you've seen any of these. Very useful for putting your bits in as you're working or whatever it is. The stuff you don't want to lose. And of course, I've got the Heineken. Let's flip it round a bit to the more exciting stuff. Yeah. Well, here we are in the main control room. And it's been set up in such a way that it's very useful for controlling things. That's why we call it a control room. Silly me. Anyway, here we go. You can notice one of the first things that you do notice when you come in here, when I'm looking at equipment, you notice these things here. And nobody ever really talks much about them, and I never see people using them, which is a real pity. Because what you can do with them, well, let me show you. I'll take the camera in closer to one of them. I've got as you can see, I've got a track sitting in the Studio One. Well, let me show you what you can do with them, or at least I'll show you one of them, because you can do it with all three at the same time, which is really, really good. Hold on. Okay, well, as you can see on the screen, we've got all the devices in the AVB network. Basically, they're linkable from this. So if I wanted to go into the, well, let's go into this one. If I went into that, remember, I've still got all the controls down below on the real desk, or I could control those rack units, and I could set up compressors, EQs, all that sort of stuff. But I've got all this as well. Whoops. So I can control the desk. You can hear it moving, listen. Yeah, quite scary. But as well as controlling this desk, of course, I can be controlling those other things as well, can't I? The important thing is, of course, I can have a gate on this one. On the one over there, I might have a compressor. On the one over here, I might have a limiter. Or I could have just a mix. There's 1,001 things you can do. Really, it's all good. And of course, you can go into the other controls as well with the setup. You'll see, backing up, plugins, profiles, everything really. So I think these are a really useful little addition to any Presonus studio. Yeah, no question. So these little stands that I had to buy, and they were not cheap, I tell you now. They're worth every penny really. In any case, I hope some of you guys get the idea of them, and you might have used them before, you might not, I don't know. But those are what I use them for, particularly when you're on a mix down, not so much when you're doing the rest of the stuff, at least in this studio. Now you also notice I've got a Presonus EMX 16M. Now what these are about is you can basically have individual mixes for musicians. So if you've got one of these in the recording area, you can send him the mix and he can do his own adjustments basically. That's really the top and bottom of it. They're quite useful in their own way, and they're actually powered by what they call PoE, or Power over Ethernet. So what's great about that is you haven't got to run any mains to it or any plugins, you know, on the wall and that sort of stuff. You know, the wall warts. You've got none of that. So it does have its place, and can be quite useful. Yeah, I do use them, but not very often. That's what I would say in a studio like this one. Now what this is something you probably haven't seen before either. It's a TC2290 dynamic digital delay, but brought up to the 20th century, or the 21st century indeed. Yeah, it's a controller for a plug-in. They re-released the TC2290 as a plug-in with a controller, and I think you can get these for about £100 or something like that. They're very useful because, well, they take you back to those sounds that came out of the TC2290 or 2290, and some of those sounds are quite difficult to achieve, but there they are. Great little controller. Don't use it much, but it is there, and that's another one of the things that's sort of out the way that I never talk about. But that's life. There's such a lot to talk about in here. What else have we got? Yeah, good old Mackie speakers. Now I had these since the days of the Mackie SDR 2496, and that's going back a lot of years. It must be, I don't know, they must be easily 10 years old, maybe more. Probably 10 years old when I bought them. And I think these are I think these are 8 inches. I think they are. But the powered monitors, wherever they are, doesn't really matter that much. And they stand on those stands, as you can see below. Yeah, to just get them off the desk enough so you don't get any trouble. And down underneath, you look really careful, you'll see there's these sort of rubber feet underneath the base. Yeah. Okay, well, here we are down on the left-hand side of the rack, and yeah, right from the top we've got a lamp that comes on. I think it turns on at this side. Let's just have a gander and see if it does. There you go. There it is. And you can have, what I like about it is you can have all these different colours. I like a bit of pink. Yeah. There they go. There's loads of them. I sort of like the purple myself, I don't like you. So, very nice. They come from up above, and I did show the unit on the last video actually, but only briefly. So, there it is. Very nice. Won't leave them on all the time. You've got to turn them off by holding that in, and off it goes. Now below that we've got the T-Rax VM100. This is like a sort of power smoother, and it checks the mains and things like that. And it's got little lights if you want to pull these things out and turn them on. Of course, there they are. I never do that. I have no use for the lamps, to be honest, at all. None at all. But it is very good because it protects you up to 10 amps on the outlets. And I used to have a similar device in my guitar rack, and I found it was quite useful. So it protects everything. That's a good thing. Now below that, this thing here with the long dangly cables, because I haven't got any short ones yet, I've got to shorten them. You know how it goes. This is a Millennium PB16 XLR in and out. Well, you should be able to see from there now that we've got, this says even tied in, and this says even tied out. Well, if you can't read it, just trust me. And the next one's the Voice Pro in and the Voice Pro out. But basically it's in and out, and you can sort of patch different things, you know, as you might want to from time to time. And that's why I included it in the rack. Yeah, all makes sense. Oh, you haven't got one? Well, you should get one because they're quite cheap, relatively speaking, and they can be used for so many things, can't they? All these external things here came from Thomann. Now, it's not that I like Thomann because, well, generally speaking, they do sell some good stuff, but they also sell some right junk from time to time. But that's another story. Now, the thing is, if you're recording literally in this room, you can just turn this on. Yeah, right, turn it on, plug your guitars in, or your mics, or whatever you want to do, and away you go. And that's why that's there. Again, I don't really use it very often, but sometimes. So it's got its place. It wasn't the cheapest of things, and I didn't really get that much use out of it because there's so much other stuff in here. But there you go. Now moving on to the Eventide, you can see it there, I've turned it on. This one had a bit of a problem where it was showing you all sorts of memory problems and things like that. It turned out to be a battery. If anybody's sort of watched that video, it's on the Evil Owl Studios channel, that one is. And I've got a couple of different ones I'm going to put in different places, but eventually what I'm going to do with this is do a bit of recording so you can actually hear what an Eventide Ultra Harmonizer sounds like. Well, to say what it sounds like is difficult because it's got, I think there's something like 1,100 different presets. And they're grouped down into, you know, different things like voice thickening or John Petrucci's guitar, or you name it. It just goes on and on and on. It's a very, very powerful device. And I hope you noticed while I was doing the bit of a chat that it just fired up perfect. That's because it had its battery replaced and there's nothing wrong with it. So there it is. All very good. And the TC Helicon is something I bought second-hand years ago for vocalists, for Alan really, I suppose, as much as anything. And yeah, don't use it much. It's a bit awkward, but it's easier to use now. I can patch it in easier because what I had in the old studio was lots of trouble with patching, and you couldn't get round the back, and you couldn't this, and you... So loads of things you just couldn't do in the old studio. So that makes it all good in this one. And that's where we're at now. Now, I'm not going to turn that one on. You've probably seen it on the other video. Well, if not, go and have a look down below because there are links in all the texts of every video I make to other videos that are associated in some way. And it's always a good idea to have a go at doing that. Now, lastly, what we did want to do was to have a little box so we could sort of store things away. And in this one we've got loads of microphones and that sort of thing. They're all out of the way, not really in anybody's way, but they tidy the place up and you know where to go to look for some of the mics. There are others in some of those boxes we've talked about already for storage. There's never enough storage, no matter what anybody tells you. Just trust me on this. It's something that's a perennial problem, never goes away. And you seriously need to consider that in any studio that you create or you operate. And if you already operate one, you'll know exactly what I mean. And if you don't, well, you're doing something wrong. Now then, I bought this keyboard a while back when I first bought the Studio One stuff, you know, the Presonus software. And you can do all the necessary things you want from keys on a keyboard, an ordinary keyboard that is, if you can remember them all. The problem is, you never will. There's far too many different things in this software and setup to remember. It just becomes an impossibility. So I bought this Studio One Editor's Keys keyboard, and to be honest, it's an absolute godsend. Even today, you'll never remember all the things, and even when you do, you know, there's new releases of this and new releases of that, and all sorts of things coming out. So I can recommend that keyboard. The singular thing I don't like about it is it's got no USB port on it, and I really wish that it did have that, because when I'm not using it for the studio, I'm using it as a PC, and part of the problem is that I use YubiKeys. Great thing about it though, you've only got to touch, you've literally only got to touch it and it's playing. Yeah, off it goes. Absolutely brilliant. You want to go back to the beginning? Oh, it's that easy. There we go. Right from the beginning. Yeah, I can't leave that on. It was already released, and yeah, I'll get a copyright strike for my own material. It's dead weird. Lunatics. That's another story again. Now, you eagle-eyed guys behind the keyboard, you will see, oh my God, he's still using them. I am. I still use those little sheets from time to time. Yeah. Now I do also want to show you the AVB routing, because I've got two stage boxes in effect. One on the left in the new section of the studio, and one on the right in the old section of the studio. One's a 36 and one's a 24. But the thing about it is this, that when I first set this up with all the new AVB stuff, the fact is you couldn't really see anything. I couldn't route anything. I did contact yeah, Johnny Doyle, there's the man, Presonus, and he went away and said, oh, give me your network diagram. But, well, to be honest, I still haven't done it. I've got to do that thing. So in the meantime, I spent a bit of a long time myself, and I did solve it in the end. I forget exactly what it was. It was something, you know, usually as stupid as it gets, and that's what happens, isn't it? Everything, you know, the errors, the problems are usually down to you. Anyway, let me show you where you go. It's all simple, and everybody probably knows how to do it, but I'm going to show you anyway. Hit home, hit audio routing, okay, and you'll see AVB input streams, and there they are. You can see them very well. It's not the best way to do things to try and show you that, but you'll probably see it. Now, another area I always had trouble was to do with monitoring. Not so much the fact that I only had one pair of monitors. Was nothing to do with that. What it related to was the PC output grabbing various things and the monitors grabbing other things through different inputs and outputs, and you could never really get to them. So when I redid this studio control room, I decided to put in a monitor station, and the monitor station version 2 from Presonus sounded to me like a plan. And the reason it sounded like a plan is, well, it's Presonus, it integrates into everything else, and that's a good thing. You can have up to 4 sets of headphones in there. I've got various inputs that I can turn on or off. It's all good. I can get the volumes going, and trust me, it can be very, very loud. Not so much that, but the other gear that I've got. And overall, yeah, very, very clever stuff. No problem in buying that. You can see the cables whipping out the back. They go off down to the Presonus trembler. I might be able to show you a picture of that rather than me showing you where it is or what it is, because it's actually behind the desk. facing across the desk. It doesn't really matter where that is, where it faces really. You're gonna hear it. Just trust me, you will hear it. And I have a control pedal for the trembler, and I can turn that on or off accordingly. And of course, I can adjust the low frequency, anything from way down below 80 hertz, for the cut. And I think mine's sitting at about 100 hertz, and it all sounds very, very good when you're actually in the studio. However, yeah, I do all my mixes on headphones, which takes me really to the next item. Basically, I've got two sets of cans for when I'm mixing down. One's a sort of semi-open back and the other one's a closed back. So you can sort of kick around between the two. I tend to use the DT880s the most for when I'm mixing down, and I get better results mixing down than with, to be honest, than with speakers. I don't know why, but that's always been the case for me. Those are DT880 Pros on the left, and the ones on the right are DT770 Pros, and I don't think them are quite as good as the 880s. But it's a matter of personal opinion. Depends what you like. For me, those are a really, really good answer for mixing down. Just thought I'd show you them. Something I never speak about, but actually they're some of the best value products that I've ever bought, really. Give me great results. And mine are stored on one of those holders there for a set of headphones, and again, they came from Thomann. They weren't that expensive, but they do have the place, them do, because these headphones get in the way quite a lot, yeah. And if you throw them, they'll spring back to you because they've got them coiled wires and they hit you on the head. Okay, that's it's just a quick shot of the screen I use. It's about a 32 inch, that is. I'm thinking of making it even bigger, but I don't know. I can move the screen out a bit further and things like that because it's mounted on the wall. And yeah, that's one of the better things because it can move in and out on this arm I've got, which I've always thought was pretty good, to tell you the truth. Yeah, so not much more to say about that. Yeah. So here's another little thing I rarely ever talk about, and this is Isotope Ozone 9. This piece of software is absolutely brilliant. Well, why is it brilliant? Well, if you want to get into the mastering side of things, there's little that you can't do, really. It's just my opinion, of course. Other people will argue and disagree, and they can do that. Feel free. But the point is, for me, for somebody like me, I'm getting older. It gets harder as you get older. Just trust me, it does. And, you know, I'm towards the end of my 60s now. And you start to forget things. Or you remember things about 30 seconds after you wanted them. And that's trust me, anybody at my age will tell you. They'll all tell you this. It's nothing unusual. It's the way it is as you get older. But Ozone, I've used since Ozone, I think 6 or 7, yeah, something like that. And one of the things I like about it is it can turn a track into a sort of style, if you will, to a different track. So imagine, I'm not saying I've done this because I haven't, but imagine you had a track like a Metallica track, say. Some people like Metallica. I like Metallica for the most part, but not all of it. But let's imagine we wanted to make our track like the Metallica one. Well, what you could do is you could whiz up here and click on this Master Assistant. Now I'm just giving you this as a demo. I'm not going to have it turned up. In fact, I'm going to turn the audio off because it's, again, going to make a lot of difference to the volumes. So if we click on that and we say, well, it's a modern track, and we can say, well, I want a reference track. You see that there? Well, that reference track could be the Metallica track that you pull in, for example. Let's imagine we've done that. And then we say, well, it's modern, we've done this, we've got the reference going. There it is, load reference track. I'll leave it at that though. And it's really for a CD, it's not for streaming. And if you watch this up the top, already up the top, can you see there's different colours? Well, them different colours are what Isotope has already determined about your track and the different sections in the track. It's quite incredible, really. So if we just say next, it's waiting for me to play, and I'm just going to play now. We'll just let it go, and you'll see that it's sort of analysing all the stuff. Yeah, you can't hear it because I've got it turned off, but the assistant's working. It's all analysing the dynamic range and setting dynamics, and just keep your eyes on the screen and watch at the top. It's quite amazing, actually. If it was listenable, you would know the difference, trust me. It's quite incredible. So I'm just going to say, yeah, I accept that. That's great. That was exactly what I wanted. And what it's done is, you can have a look through these. It's done any EQ, whatever EQ matches that track that we loaded, to make yours the same. It's done the dynamics, dynamic EQ, maximizer. So it's all there, and it's just been done totally automatically. Now, I'm not saying that that's it, that's the end of the story, because a lot of guys actually want to really tweak it a little bit here and there, if you will. I think that's what they do. But for me, when you've done that, when you've done all the running around and the rest of it, and you've got the headphones on and the rest, let me stop. I can tell you now that it's about as good as you get. So Isotope Ozone 9, I completely recommend, because it's just an awesome piece of software, and it's worth every single penny, as is a lot of the other Isotope things. So I bought one of the complete packages, really, a studio package. Expensive, but I can tell you now, oh my God, the difference is incredible. Okay, well, we've moved along a little bit to the right-hand rack, and this is relating really to more older stuff, but I've got a lot of backups on the SDR24. Here it is, 24-track hard disk recorder, and these things pull out. I must have at least a dozen backups of drives, and some of these drives, it said you could only have a sort of 20 gig or something like that, but I can tell you now that's not the case. It stores huge amounts. 24-track. Of course, the problem with it is it's not quite easily integratable into the Presonus stuff in the way that I might have liked it, because first of all, there's no ADAT connectivity on the Studio Live. They took that away from the earlier version, which I thought was a bit of a shortcoming, really. So one of the things I did, and I've covered this probably before, but there it is, a Motu LP32, and this device down here has 4 complete IOs of ADAT or ADAT, and those are going off from and into the Mackie. And on the output side of the Motu LP32 is AVB. So I can take the AVB, the stream, and route it straight into Studio One. Yeah, now that changes things, because I can take all my old tracks and pull them into this newer software, because on my old stuff I used to use the Mackie hard disk and Yamaha 02R96, and the problem was there was no easy editing for any of that. But now I can take those tracks and pull them into Studio One and do all the editing, all the remixing and all the rest of it, and end up with a really, really good solution. And that was one of the reasons that I chose Presonus. I looked at all the other stuff like the Dante and the rest of it. Dante's good stuff, no doubt about that, supported by a lot of people. But the AVB solution, well, to be honest, everything's cheaper. Yeah, I'm a cheapskate, yeah. Well, you are too, probably. But don't worry, I won't tell anybody if you don't tell them about me. Anyway, enough of that. That's the aspect of the Mackie SDR2496 and the LP32. Now just before we move on much further, have a look down on that piece of wood below the PC and you'll see some nuts and bolts. Well, those are not part of the original desk as it comes, and this desk is notorious for having the legs or the wheels that are underneath break off when you load it up well, and this one's really loaded up well. So what I can recommend is that you get nuts and bolts and bolt it in from underneath, or you could bolt it from the top. I just use the bolts I had, I'm afraid, and that will stop the legs breaking off at any stage in the future, because you can mark my words, they will, if you don't get that right and you load it all up. It's a heavy desk when it's all loaded. You can imagine the weight of all this desk on those little casters. They are metal casters, but honestly the screws pull out, and that's something you need to consider. Now lastly down here is the PC. Now that Dell Precision Tower 7810 cost an arm and a leg. It was about I think $2.5 to $3 grand that was. It's a Xeon processor. Well, actually there's two of them in there, and it does all the stuff, and yeah, lots of memory. I think there's 64 gig in that. All the stuff, basically it's got everything, and it's just been basically written off by Microsoft because of Windows 11. It's not upgradable, they don't want to know, thanks, goodbye. I don't like that. Well, the good news for you is that I've bought a new PC. I think that's based on a 12900 processor, and Series 5 of the bloody memory. It's brand new, so I can't really tell you that much about it. But when it comes, we're going to be doing that on camera and have a look at all that stuff as it goes. Yeah, it should be really exciting to see that stuff, because I haven't really seen anybody doing that. And I know that Studio One isn't yet supported on Windows 11, but well, we'll have a look at what works and what doesn't, won't we? And just in case you haven't seen my other videos, part 1 and part 2, take a good look at that dongle on the end of the red lanyard, and that's a new one because I smashed the old one off, messing around with PCs and all that sort of junk, so beware of that, won't you? Now this video is beginning to start turning into a longer video, I'm afraid. Just want to show you something. Right at the top, just to the left of that orange thing, which is a cable tester, you'll see that there's a Wi-Fi network, and that connects into the equipment in the rack and operates through a cable that eventually was run to my house, but we'll come back to that. Now you can probably see what's going on in that rack. Let's look at it from the top. Right at the top is a Netgear switch. That's coming in from my house, in fact, and that top switch really looks after the regular network. So if you look in this rack and you think to yourself, well, it's got a lot going on in there, well, what's it really all about? Well, in effect, there are two networks. There's the top one, which I've just told you about with the Netgear switch, and that feeds off everywhere where I need control of the Presonus equipment, because they have a control port and they have an AVB port on Presonus equipment. So the top one looks after that, and that will distribute out. If you remember when we looked in the new section, there was a left network connector, which was AVB, and a right one which said, oh, this is for the ordinary network. Well, that was more than just an ordinary network. It actually also controls the equipment, and that's how we can connect to them quite easily to control them. Okay, so you're with me so far. Below that, you can see two Presonus switches, and those Presonus switches look after the AVB network. So they sort of link together. You can see them. Look at the left-hand side, and you'll see a yellow cable between port 1 top and port 1 bottom, and all the rest of the other cables that run around for AVB. And that's basically how I did it. But it did take a little bit of getting there. When you're doing your cabling, you really want to be careful about using, well, junk. Let me explain. Okay, this is a connector that fits on the wall in a socket, and round the back is where you fit the wires. You can see them there. And if you go and buy the cheap stuff, I don't mean the cable and I don't mean the connector really. What I mean is the tool to push the cables into where they're supposed to go. You can see the colours and the rest of them there. But you get the cheap one. They cost about 40 pence or 50 pence for this plastic thing with a bit of a T-plate in the end. You've probably seen them. They're absolute junk. They won't work, they don't do the job right. So what you need is you need another tool, a thing called a crone tool. Yeah, I think it's K-R-O-N-E. Yeah, I think that's it. Crone tool. And the crone tool will take your cables, push them in and cut them off all in one go. And yeah, that's what you need. You do anything else, you can just trust me that you're going to be messing around for weeks on end. Yeah, and then how reliable are they? You want the crone tool and that'll solve your problem. And if anybody can see that orange thing at the top there, that's actually just a cable tester that I got from, again, from Thomann. Yeah, it cost me about 20 quid, and it's, you know, it's one of them things that you're going to find very useful, really. Yeah, especially in a studio like this one. There's stuff everywhere and it's all over the place. This is the main control room. You'll notice also down at the side of that rack is a big thick ducting, and as we go down, that's where some of the network stuff comes out, and the rest of the cables come out down at the bottom. So it's reasonably tidy round there, although I can't really get the camera around too easily to do. I'll let you have a look, you know. So let's move into the other part of the studio now, which is the original recording room. Well, actually, just before we do move on, you can look at that chair there and you can have a go on, have a laugh. Ha ha ha. Yeah, I'll use a drum stool or something, right, for when you're mixing. No, you won't. A very important aspect, and nobody ever talks about it, or I don't see anybody talking about any of this stuff. You know, the sort of people who will tell you that you can't operate a studio without, well, without the soundproofing and the rest of it. But in reality, oh, I hate to say it, but you can. And I have since 1995, very successfully. I'm not saying those guys are wrong. I'm just saying I ain't spending any money on something that probably doesn't really do that much. And for me, this works for me. It may not work for them, but I can tell you what will work for all of them. A decent chair. You could be sitting behind that desk for absolutely hours, and that's why that chair there is on this video. It's not as stupid as you might think. Always make sure that you're very comfortable when you're doing your mixing down and all the rest of it. As for the recording side, well, it's up to you. Okay, well, here we go. Here's the door where we come into the older part, the recording section. And as I move around, some of it will be familiar to some people. You notice I've got, again, plenty of storage and stuff like that. And a mic stand sitting out the way there. And then we've got one of these Presonus ear mixes that's wired in, all working. It's in the studio, it's all good. And you can plug your headphones in and away you go. Well, if somebody sets it up right on the desk, that's one of the really one of the shortcomings. Unless you're doing it all the time, you tend to forget what you did and then it doesn't work, and then you've got to go back and do it again. Don't forget the important aspect of heating in your studio, because that little radiator down there is part and parcel of it, and you don't want your gear going damp and cold and wet and horrible. And trust me, if you don't look after the heating and the also the humidity, which, bearing in mind, I don't know where your studio is in the world, but I know in England it can get a bit cold and it can get a bit damp, and it will get to hit your cables and the rest of it if you don't do something about that. So in here I've got lots of stuff that's been seen many times. I've got my Kemper, I've got a TC Electronic effects rack, and I've got a Matrix Elements GT1000 power amplifier in that top rack. And above that is the rack for in this section of the studio, and that's got a Studio 32R. You can see it there. I've got various wires going off to various places. We just plug in as we need them. If you need lots of inputs, well, they're there. If you don't need lots of inputs, well, they're still there. That's how I looked at it when I bought the unit, because I could have bought something simpler, but then again, if ever you need the extras, you're stuck basically. So the moral is, yeah, always, in my opinion, over-specify what you want. And if you don't do that, you'll regret it later and have to buy some more. Further down, I've got the various bits and pieces, loads of pedals in here and that sort of stuff, because this is where a lot of the guitars get recorded on a microphone. I might even be in the control room at the time, but this is where the volume goes, in here. So nothing else I can tell you about in here really, except I'll show you around. I've got a few different amps there to be going on with, and moving around some more. Yeah, there's one of those headphone things again on the right hand side of the image, and again it's something that becomes so useful. You don't understand how hard it can be faffing around looking for cables or whatever if they're not stacked up like that one. Very easy when you've got it like that. If you look up there, yeah, right there above the Behringer speaker, there's that fuse box that had the problem with the cable. And if you look at right in the corner below the Behringer, you'll see a sort of piece of ducting that goes down, and that's a piece of ducting I did to install that cable back into the garage. Now, while we're talking about cables, I ended up having to run a network cable from in the studio all the way across to my house. It ran from the rack in the control room, the one we looked at, and it runs through here and down into that corner. See that cable running along the skirting board that sort of takes a dive? Yeah, that goes through into the garage, and then through the garage, and then across into my house, into the main network. So I used to do all this with wireless, and I have to tell you that I don't recommend that at all. It was pretty useless. It'd work, then it wouldn't, then it would, then it wouldn't. Then you'd have interference, then you'd have dropouts, you'd have all sorts of things going on. Ultimately, the only real fix, if you want a network in your studio, is you get a cable to it, especially if it's outside. I can't overemphasize that enough. The wireless stuff was total pain. So that Behringer speaker is one of two speakers that are sitting on the wall, and the desk below it allows me to mix things from other equipment. I've showed it before probably to most people, but if you're a new viewer, here it is. Inside that Helix rack, just below it, is a Tascam player, which you can play back various backing tracks or that sort of thing. So it's a great place to also do a lot of rehearsals and practicing, and where you write the music. It's not always about let's record. It's far from it. In fact, the recording times are substantially less than the amount of time you spend sitting writing music or trying to come up with new ideas and that sort of thing. And that piece of gear there, that Tascam, along with its backing tracks and tracks that you might make up with a basic idea, that's what they really are. They go off into that desk there, and then they can play them back and work out the next section or the next piece of the music. So a lot of the stuff's I wouldn't say it's mostly instrumental, it isn't, but there's a good mix between instrumental and vocalised, and getting it all right really matters. So that's one of the ways that you do it. Anyway, let's move on. There's the Helix there, which is that goes off into the Presonus Studio 32R. That's what the two wires were, and it goes into that in stereo. And I have the Kemper doing the same thing when I put the wires in. It's not like that all the time, Below that we got one of those Boss amps, a Wazacraft amp, and below that we've got a Wazacraft speaker, which is purportedly designed for that amp. Now, once again, I maintain, just trust me on this, that the storage space is absolutely essential. Well, what have we got there? I've got all sorts of things in the bottom of there, including loads of technical manuals and stuff like that. But if you look on the left-hand side of the second shelf up, where all them blue boxes are, those are some of the Mackie backups I've got and multi-tracks from when we used to do all that stuff. And very useful they are too. So having somewhere to store archives is also important. Oh, you do all yours on the net? Well, best of luck. There's nothing wrong in doing that. But you're not easily going to do that with a Mackie SDR backup. Definitely not. Much harder to do than just that. So that was my solution at the time. I've got a few bits and pieces on the top there that still haven't been sorted out. You can see them. But don't worry about them. And moving to the right, I do want to show you this because it's quite wild. There they are. If you look down there, all that gear right there is going to be sold. There's just too much of it. Far too much to spend the time with. So I moved on to the Mesa Engineering 100 watt head that was a multi-watt, and anybody who watches channel will have seen that from a while back. So I decided to sell the Road King 2, and the one above it I'm going to do a modification on that for a chappie over in the States, and that will give it MIDI. It's really a demonstration of the MIDI board that he sells, and that looks to me like a good idea. Let's move around a bit further. Now I want to draw your attention to that door there. That's no ordinary door. It's actually a big fat door that is extremely difficult to get in, especially when it's locked. You know, I've talked about security over and over and over through this video. And if you look to the right of the door, you'll see like a keypad with an alarm underneath it. Can you see that? Well, I just spent 2 days making that work. And the old one worked, but of course once you've had those builders in, and they've done this and they've done that and done the rest, it didn't work. So that's been updated. The outside, the strobe, that's all been done as well, and that's very, very loud. It's an essential factor when you have a studio that is not inside your house. Well, it's an essential factor for your house, isn't it, these days? Yeah, it is. But when you have an external studio, it's even more a problem if you don't take security measures seriously, and you really do have to do that. Anyway, I just wanted to talk about that because most people don't talk about it with recording studios and things like that, and I think it is absolutely crucial. Okay, well this is the last section. You can see I've got another one of those racks. They're really useful, honestly, and it's got piles and piles of boxes in the bottom because these are the things you need. You need the tools, which takes me to those two, the grey one and the cream one on the second shelf. They're both full of tools and things like that. I've also got a couple of amps to the right of that are just stored there for now. And yeah, they'll be moved around as I need them. But that's where they're stored. Once I get rid of all them others from the other side of the door in this room, you know, get rid. Okay, well the very last thing I want to talk about is something I did mention briefly in video 1, I think it was, of the series. This is video 3, and if you look at the lighting in here, notice it's reasonably bright. It's so bright it casts a shadow over my bald head. But that's okay. The reason I wanted to mention it is that I used to have regular tubes in here, you know, the old-fashioned type, and now I've got LED lights. They're much brighter. But in that extension, I had to go and get new lamps to solve that problem of inadequate lighting in that room. And bearing in mind it's a video media room as much as recording, it's very essential that the lighting's right. And it might be the same in your studio if you do any video recording and things like that. But the lighting is always important. You know, you don't want to be working in the dark. You know, no more in the dark than if you don't know Presonus Studio 1 well enough. That's in the dark. I've been there and done that. Yeah, so that's it anyway. That's the rundown of the studio, how it is absolutely today. And it's not complete. There are so many more things I've got to do and so many more things I want to implement to show various people what I do. Like I said, I'm not perfect, and I'm sure that most of us aren't. Well, you know, it works for me. It might not work for you. But I don't think anybody shows you videos like this one's been. You know, what I actually do with my setup and what works for me. And well, might not work for you, or it might be the best thing you've ever seen. Who knows? Yeah. So until next time, don't forget to visit www.tonymackenzie.com. Don't forget to subscribe. Yeah. Do the thumbs up. Ring that bell, and don't forget the important all, else you won't get notifications. And if you want to subscribe to Evil Owl Studios, please go and do the same thing. I'm trying to build that channel up, and it's really difficult to get off the ground. Really difficult. It's very specialised areas of business, as most of the stuff, you know, if you're not a guitarist or you don't like studios, you're never going to watch any of it. So please do subscribe. It helps the channel, and it helps me to help you. Whether you think I'm good, bad or indifferent, well, let's put it this way round. If you ask me to subscribe to you, I will do, unless you've got that stuff on YouTube. You shouldn't have. Now get out of here. Boom!